Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, and today I'm bringing you another Goosebumps talk type of video. In today's video, we're going to be looking at books that retroactively became Goosebumps books. I decided, since a lot of you have reached out to me on Discord, even in private messages on Twitter, comments on videos, ever since I showed off my collection video, with curiosities about these obscure Goosebumps stories and items and adaptations and such to add to their collections, and I figured I would break this down into like a 3-part series. Now, by all means, stuff can be added on to the conversation at some other point, potentially. There could be some stuff that gets unearthed that we just don't know about, or maybe a book comes out of the woodwork that gets revealed to be linked to Goosebumps. You never know. So this video could change at some point, and I probably will update it if it ever does. Now, I'm breaking this series down into 3 parts. The first one, obviously, we're talking about Goosebumps books that were retroactively, added into the Goosebumps family. The second installment is going to be obscure Goosebumps adaptations, like weird comic adaptations, releases with some original art, stuff like that. And then the third installment is going to be obscure Goosebumps stories. Now, these are labeled Goosebumps stories, but not a lot of people know about them, and they're, like I said, obscure and kind of weird. And, I guess there is a 4th subset, and I feel like I've already talked about this. These are theorized Goosebumps books, or to-be Goosebumps books. If you want to know more about that, I've already touched on what I want to say about that in my thoughts on the 6 novellas video I put out recently. I will link that in the description down below, and so you can check that out. But I will not be covering that because I feel like I've already touched base on that. But without further ado, let's get into these books that retroactively became Goosebumps books. This is the smallest category, and I think out of all of them, these are the most obtainable things to find for a lot of you. You can go buy these online or even in bookstores still, fairly cheap, and you can acquire them, and it's simple as that. So, there's only about 4 or 5 of them, and so I guess I'll talk about the newest one, because while it hasn't really been, done like the other books I will be mentioning in this list, where these were released and then actually retroactively turned into Goosebumps books, kind of, right? Or even actually. This one is just a title that was supposed to be in the original 62 that never got used, and has years later now become a standalone book that Stein decided to finally release. And the first book we're going to bring up is Slime Doesn't Pay. Now, Slime Doesn't Pay, I already made a video talking about that book and what happened with that and how that came to be, and I'll also link that video down in the description and in the comment section down below, so you guys can go check out that video along with the novella video. But essentially, Slime Doesn't Pay is the weirdest one to bring up in this video, because it was never turned into a book until this year, and it hasn't even released yet. But the title of it was linked to Goosebumps at one point, and it's been considered lost media for many years. And fans have, speculated on what happened to the title. Was it, originally going to be a book, maybe like Monster Blood 3, or maybe even Monster Blood 4, and the publisher decided, hey, this is too close to Monster Blood. We might as well just market it like a Monster Blood book. There's a lot of theories out there, but nobody ever knew what came of it. And now Stein has retroactively decided to use the title with this independent publisher. I think it's called Blackstone Publishing, and it'll be releasing it at the end of this year. And we're getting into the territory where it's officially unofficial Goosebumps for this one. Unlike the other 4 that I'm going to be bringing up. But there's really nowhere else to include this. So I decided to put it in this little category here, where Slime Doesn't Pay retroactively after all these years is finally getting made. And I think a lot of diehard fans will consider this story a long-lost Goosebumps book. You take it for what it is. You don't have to. As a matter of fact, all of these, you can take it with a grain of salt if you like. These are optional additions to your collection to display on your Goosebumps shelf, to include with your Goosebumps books. Don't take what I'm saying as absolute fact. But Slime Doesn't Pay, at least the book title, was linked to the past, and Stein finally turned the title into a story. So that's the first one. Right? Now, these next two are kind of peculiar because these are books that spawned their own franchise. And the franchise became mega popular in the late 2000s, and it's called the Haunting Hour franchise. We saw a TV show get made, its own movie, with the IP, and it developed a huge fan base. But a lot of people don't know that the Haunting Hour franchise in other countries was advertised as Goosebumps books. So technically, the Haunting Hour franchise, at least if we're talking about the stories that were included in the books, the Nightmare Hour and the Haunting Hour, those are Goosebumps. So when you look at that old TV show and you see the adaptations of the stories that were included in these short story books, those episodes can technically be considered Goosebumps. And even if you want to go a little bit further, you can even recontextualize the whole Haunting Hour show as Goosebumps, right? And you might be like, well, where's the proof of this? Well, I got some proof. And here we go. I have a Spanish version of the Nightmare Hour right here, foreign language, and it says La Hora de las Pesadillas. I think that's how you say it. My Spanish is really bad, but Pesadillas is Goosebumps in Spanish. This was released as a Goosebumps book, the Nightmare Hour. Meaning that even though in America it was not Goosebumps, in other countries it was. So you can go out of your way and say, well, because it's Goosebumps in other countries, then all these stories in here are also Goosebumps as well. You can headcanon it, right? And the stories included in here are Pumpkinhead, Alien Candy, The Most Evil Sorcerer, Nightmare Inn, I'm Not Martin, The Black Mask, Afraid of Clowns, The Dead Body, Make Me a Witch, and The Ghostly Stare. All of those stories retroactively became Goosebumps in other countries. So you can say that these are Goosebumps stories if you wanted to. And the same thing could be applied to the Haunting Hour, which I have a foreign edition here. Now, it doesn't say Pesadillas on the cover. It just says Al Final de la Noche. And you can't really tell until you open up to the title page, where it's labeled as Pesadillas. Goosebumps in Spanish, right? In Spain. So this book, The Haunting Hour, was also turned into a Goosebumps book. Like I said before, with the Nightmare Hour. This book was not advertised as Goosebumps in the States, but because it's advertised in other countries as so, you can go out of your way to say that this is also a Goosebumps book. And the stories in here are The Halloween Dance, The Bad Babysitter, Revenge of the Snowman, How to Bargain with a Dragon, The Mummy's Dream, Are We There Yet?, Take Me With You, My Imaginary Friend, Losers, and Can You Draw Me? So that makes 20 stories out of this franchise linked to Goosebumps retroactively. And not a lot of people know that. So, if you don't have The Haunting Hour and Nightmare Hour in your collection, you can pass them off like Goosebumps stories, and here's your proof. Right here. Now, to get even more obscure, we're going to go into these next two. And these next two, like I said, are super obscure and not a lot of people know about it. And here I have this magazine. This is a Pesadillas comic from Spain that I had to pay a pretty price for to get over here in the States. But the story I want to bring up out of this is called, let me see, it's on the first page here, Yo no es un monstruo. and it's this little written text with some art, which you can see, and it's only like a front and back of a page, and it continues on to here, and then it starts a new story right here. But this translates to Joe is not a monster. Now, Joe is not a monster in here was also released in an American book that some of you might have or might not have out in your collections, but I have seen this in like Books A Million and Barnes & Noble as of recent, and you can find it in here, and it is collected in this book called Beware. Right, and I'll turn to the page of Joe is not a monster real quick. Let's see here, what page is it? All right, and you get this little introduction of Joe is not a monster there, as you can see. And then you get the art by Tim Jacobus. There's some art with it. Tim Jacobus did the art here. And you get the story, which is a very tiny story. But because it was in a Spanish comic, as like a text story with some art, the story in here, in Beware, makes Beware unofficially a Goosebumps book. Actually, technically, officially. Just like The Haunting Hour and The Nightmare Hour, this is pretty much officially Goosebumps. Now, the other R.L. Stine stories that he did in here, I think it's, let's see, he did The Surprise Guest. I don't know if that's been included in something foreign that has the Goosebumps name on it. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it has been. I just haven't seen proof of it. But I would go out of my way to say that this is a Goosebumps book. If you want to add this to your collection, you can, and pass it off, and I just showed you the proof there. And there's also, you know, he did a Jewish folktale retelling of the terrifying adventures of the Golem, which, you know, is kind of cool too. That's a very old story to make it worth the purchase. But, yeah, Beware by R.L. Stine is retroactively a Goosebumps book. Now, the most famous one that a lot of you, I've noticed a lot of you out there, especially you big-time collectors, when I look at your bookshelves, I peek at your Series 2000 section and I see this book at the very end of it, and I'm proud. I'm proud that everybody's caught on and finally given the attention to this book that it deserves. And the most famous example of a book that retroactively became a Goosebumps book is The Adventures of Shrinkman. Now, The Adventures of Shrinkman, for many years, was thought to be what, you know, I'm quoting that retro out there who does Raiders of the Lost Bookmark. I love their blog. But retro calls them the Unbumped Six. And a lot of fans for many years speculated that these 6 books had maybe some ties to Goosebumps, but they were just like scrapped ideas that Stine had laying around and released around the year 2000/2001. I don't know, I guess make money to kind of pay off court debts for, you know, the infamous Scholastic versus R.L. Stine case, Parachute Press, you know what I mean? And then years later, around the 2010 range, all 6 of these got re-released. Now, when they got re-released, they got put on the mainstream attention because this first printing here, they didn't make many of these, and they're kind of hard to come across these days. But people started sleuthing on the internet and discovered something from the past that was uncovered, and it was called The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader. And in doing so, you know, after they heard, I think Tim Jacobus showed the art of it and revealed the title, the sleuths went on the hunt, found evidence of it in the past, and then just asked R.L. Stine flat out, hey, is this book, The Adventures of Shrinkman, The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader? And R.L. Stine confirmed it on Twitter. Now, if you need more proof, I think what really sold people on it recently was The Art of Goosebumps that came out, right? And in the back of the book, in the Series 2000 section, you can pull this out. It's really cool information about this. It says unpublished. Unpublished. The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader. It has the original Jacobus art right here on the left. Right? But let me read it to you. It says, there's a blurb that they took from the Goosebumps wiki. But in the year 2000, R.L. Stine published a one-off book titled The Adventures of Shrinkman. The book was the first of 6 standalone novellas that Stine would publish between 2000 and 2001. On November 14, 2017, R.L. Stine confirmed on Twitter that the plot for The Adventures of Shrinkman had evolved from The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader. And later on, I think there was something on the lines that he pretty much confirmed that The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader is not lost because The Adventures of Shrinkman is essentially that book, right? So, yeah, this lost book lived on to become this, right? So this is what a lot of people consider the Lost Series 2000 Book 26. And it's for good reason. And now a lot of collectors are picking up on it, have added it to their collections, and it seems like this type of thing really resonates with fans, because when fans get nostalgia, they think back to their favorite series, like the original 62 and Series 2000. And having one more Series 2000 book out there is awesome, right? Not to mention, this book right here also dropped that there was a Book 27 book title called When the Snake Bites. And there's people speculating about that. And who knows, maybe we'll find something out about that eventually at some point as well. But The Adventures of Shrinkman is, without a doubt, the most common one that you'll see that people will affirm that this is a Goosebumps book. They don't care if it doesn't have Goosebumps in the title. They consider this Goosebumps Series 2000 Book 26. Right. So yeah, to kind of recap one more time, here are the books that have retroactively become Goosebumps books. And like I said, you can take it or leave it. These are like optional pickups for your collection if you really want to consider it that. But the first one doesn't have a physical release yet, but that is Slime Doesn't Pay. And that releases, I think, later this year. So if you are a diehard Goosebumps fan, maybe a massive fan of the original 62, go ahead and pick up Slime Doesn't Pay. And we can call it the original 63 with an asterisk, if you really wanted to. The next book is The Nightmare Hour, and I showed you why. It was turned into Goosebumps overseas. Same thing with its sister book, The Haunting Hour. So it makes all 20 stories featured in both of these books retroactively Goosebumps stories, and thus making these Goosebumps books. Then you have Beware, which features Joe Is Not a Monster. That was featured in that magazine I just showed you. And that means that Beware can now be considered a Goosebumps book as well. And the most famous example that I think a lot of you diehard fans have probably already tried to acquire for your collection, and that is The Adventures of Shrinkman, which is confirmed to be the Lost Series 2000 Book 26, The Incredible Shrinking Fifth Grader. So yeah, those are the books that retroactively became Goosebumps books. Let me know down in the comments section. Is there any I missed? If there is, please let me know. That would be great information. And do you own any of these books? Do you want to own them now after watching the video? And what are your thoughts? Do you consider these Goosebumps books or close enough? I'm dying to know. And I'll see you next time.